This conference will now be recorded.
$101,130. Reserves were $3,736,871. Activities was $249,100. Food was $10,673. Clubs, $140,298. And the asset improvement, $816,659.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from any board member? Seeing none, any questions or comments from any resident?
No picture.
I know, just, no, thank you. I'll get this down pat one of these days. So for those of you online, they're saying that I'm looking at the chat right now, the audio is great, but no video. And just to let you know that the staff is working on that. Okay, so next thing we need is to approve the October 2022 financial reports.
I move to accept the October 2022 financials.
We have a second. Any questions or comments from any member of the board regarding the October 22 financials? Seeing none, any questions, comments from the residents regarding the financials? Seeing none, the motion on the table is to approve the October 2022 financials. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next thing on the agenda is a committee report from the Budget Committee. Becca, would you make the motion?
I move to approve the transfer of $310,000 from operating excess funds to reserve fund.
Can I get a second? Okay. So Becca, would you like to give us a little background on this?
Okay. The end of last year, we had $309,000 and odd dollars in our operating fund left over. The end of the year after the audit and everything, all the books were closed. In previous years, we take that excess as long as we don't need it and move it to the reserve account. So what this is doing is taking that excess operating fund money and moving it to our reserve fund, which is at this point sorely underfunded. So that's where we need it.
Okay. And this is the second time that we've done this. So Bill Powell, Chair of the Budget Committee, do you have any comments on this?
Whoa.
Right. What is do you recall off the top of your head what percentage you like to keep every year? 10%. Thank you. Okay. Any questions about this motion to any of the board members here? Seeing none, do any residents have any questions about the motion? Okay, I see thumbs up there. Okay. The motion on the table is to approve the transfer of $310,000 from the operating excess funds to the reserve fund. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Wonderful. Okay. Next thing on the agenda is a report from the Communications Committee. Will the liaison, the Communication Committee, like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the appointment of David Paternari and Sue Deal to the Communications Committee.
I'll second that. Do you have any comments about Dave and Sue?
Both Pat and myself met with the two candidates and very enthusiastic about them. They have great backgrounds and very, very communicative.
They've got great credentials too. I would just suggest, I don't know, is Dave here? And I'd suggest that none of you leave your cell phone sitting around because the man knows how to do cell phone forensics on it. So.
Yes, he does. Yes, they both have strong
backgrounds.
computer skills, which
Yes.
is handy as well.
Any questions from any board member? Seeing none. Any questions, comments from the community? Is there anything on the chat that you guys can see? Okay, assuming none. All in favor of approving the appointment of Dave Pinanari and Sue Deal to the Communications Committee, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. See how easy it is to get on a committee? All you have to do is apply. Good. All right. Move on. The next agenda item is from the tennis club. Given that I'm liaison to the clubs, I will make the motion. I move to approve the purchase of a spare net for the tennis courts in the amount of $253. Can I get a second?
Second.
On this?
From what I understand from the tennis club, they like to have a spare net in case of damage to their existing nets that are on the court. We don't have a backup net. The condition of the nets that they have are okay right now, but if in case of any damage to those nets, they would like to have a backup to put in their storage facility.
Any comments or questions from any board member?
Do we have an idea of what kind of funds they have in their bank account? Because recently we just went through this with another club and required them to pay half.
I don't have a dollar amount off head right this moment, but I do know that there are sufficient funds to cover, $253.
From their club.
Yes.
Any other questions from any board member? Okay, he does. I would like to amend the motion that we ask that the tennis club pay half and the second half come from the donations that the clubs have been making to activities. And
I'll second that.
any questions, comment from the board? Okay, all right. Residents, open it up to you. Not that much money, but we're trying to be consistent here. Seeing no other questions, let's call for a vote then. Even though it's a small amount, I'd like to do a roll call vote, please.
Barbara Fiegelberg,
Yes.
Ron Woodward,
Yes.
Becca Paulson. Marie Beschen,
Yes.
Marilyn Sorensen. Steve Deal. Roberta Ernest.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the design guideline amendment. Marilyn, as a liaison to the committee, would you like to make that motion, please?
I move to approve the design guidelines amendment.
As in our packet. I'll second that. Would you like to give some detail on that? It's in our board packet, page 35.
Page 35.
22. Sorry, on my software I'm using, it's page 35. Standard.
The portable storage units, we had I believe this is the one where we had 4 of a certain size, and we now are permitting people to buy 1 shed style or up to 4 of the same size. There's a size limitation. The cabinet style maximum size is 77 inches high, 54 inches wide, and 30 inches deep. A maximum of 4 units are permitted on each lot. So they can take up the same space as this one if you choose to buy the 1 or the 4. Shed style, maximum size is 80 square feet total. Must not exceed 10 inches in height. Now this is the 10 feet, I'm sorry, in height. Must be located toward the rear of the lot and may not encroach beyond property setback lines in any direction.
So this shed style is probably equivalent to 4 of the cabinet styles. The cabinet styles are the old Rubbermaids and many
That's
people
correct.
have here. Okay, and so it's 10 feet tall, versus the prior one was 77 inches in height. So this taller?
Well, it's taller, but I think the main thing would be those cabinet styles, you cannot put larger items in them. And if you have one large shed, you have room to put any number of things like a fire pit or portable heaters, a bags game, larger things that will not fit in a cabinet.
And this is a
Bicycles.
temporary product. I mean, because now we allow sheds, which we refer to as storage sheds that need to be stick built on our lots to 120 square feet. So this isn't another shed, but really it is a temporary structure versus a permanent structure.
Right, it's more like a Rubbermaid product.
I have one question. Is this, it was a little confusing to me whether you have one and then you have the or in there. Is it strictly Rubbermaid type products?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, it says up at the top, portable storage units.
It says shed style. It was confusing where it could be temporary, but wood.
So to clarify, this is a
So
portable
just a
storage unit.
clarification.
Portable. yeah.
Right. Subsections of portable storage units being cabinet style and shed style.
Okay. Do we have a picture of it by any chance?
It has on the second line, units must be Rubbermaid style.
Right.
Is there any restriction on where they can be placed on the lot?
It has to be in the back. That's down on the bottom. If you
Roberta,
look at
could you use
that,
your microphone?
It says must be located toward the rear of the lot,
No, I'm talking about the sheds.
right down here.
No, I'm talking about the cabinet.
Oh, the cabinets are also
The
located at the
cabinets.
rear of the
Mike,
lot.
did we have a restriction on where the cabinet boxes could be?
Right now, the language in the design guideline says that it must be approved by DRC. However, we don't have very legitimate consistency on what the location of these cabinet styles are. Typically, they're not towards the front of the lot. We've had some that have gone into RV ports due to removal of the recreational vehicle and or even the setback of the properties, because this cabinet style is more of something you could drag out of the way pretty simply. You know, a lot of folks will use them for their weed killer, paint cans, things along those lines. The need is, or the request for need is for larger items to store in these locations, bicycles,
They
etc.
couldn't be in a easement though, could they?
They are in a setback, yes, within the design guidelines right now. Yes, the cabinets themselves can sit in the easement. We wanted to make sure that the shed style would not encroach
Would
into
not.
setbacks.
Okay. All right.
And Mike, isn't it true that we have one or two that are already out there in the community of the larger style?
I would say more than two, yes.
Thank you.
My, this seems like a real simple amendment and should, no big deal. But how many storage sheds do we need? We've got the ability to have a 120-foot permanent shed on there, which some of us have our washer and dryers and store our golf cart in there when we're not here. And I do acknowledge I have a cabinet style Rubbermaid in the back of mine to keep the stuff. I guess I'm married to a pack rat, and the more ability I give him the opportunity to put more things in, he'll fill it.
We've had several requests for these items. We've had a number of requests that we have decided that it might be something we wanted to address for more space.
How many? I mean, how much? But are we going to have all the setbacks completely full?
Well, in this case, the setbacks wouldn't be, the new shed style wouldn't be within setback of the lot. Most commonly behind an existing casino. The reality of the storage structures that we have, I think the primary request that I hear from a DRC perspective, is that a lot of the residents have converted the existing storage structure into the casita. And that's kind of where our language goes between casita and storage structure. They got the little bathrooms and kitchenettes in them and whatnot, where there's not a tremendous amount of room for storage. I know that that's individual, request, but I think that's the majority of our requests are coming from, well, I don't really have storage in my casita because it's not for storage anymore. It's more so for
Is
a
that,
bathroom.
is that then included in their habitable space, that the percentage of the lot they're able to fill?
No.
Okay. And
I also, Barb, I think that what we're hearing too, people are more comfortable locking up things like the bicycles and other larger items too, and would feel more comfortable if they had a storage shed that was large enough to do that.
Questions, comments from the residents? Yes, Michael, would you come up and state your name, height, weight, natural hair color?
Mike Ragland, 1130. Typically, changes to the DRC guidelines are discussed with the community before they're approved by a board meeting. Has that happened?
This has not come up at a town meeting. So we're bringing it up here right now for people's input. This is just we're not making changes to the entire design guidelines. This is just one amendment based on the fact that there have been a number of requests for this.
And my wife is the pack rat, not me.
Okay, well, I heard that, but not a. Yeah. Mhm.
Could you just repeat the maximum size again?
Okay, the cabinet style, which is the Rubbermaid tall one that many of us are used to now, is maximum of 77 inches high, 54 wide, 30 deep. A maximum of 4 of those units are permitted on each lot. That's in the current regulations. Then the next thing is what we're adding is the shed style, which is the maximum size would be 80 square feet, must not exceed 10 feet tall in height, and must be located toward the rear of the lot. Property setback lines.
He said it's the box.
I just barely
Any
stuffed that one out.
questions, comments from the residents?
Hey, we gotta get back in there because I need to see.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just curious, so does this
No, it does not refer to anything that you leave out.
Any other questions, comments?
There, okay.
I looked at the chat. Anything there?
This is coming on and
Let's
off.
call for the motion. So the motion. The addition of a shed style unit. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Just cuz. Thank you. Okay, this next one's going to take a while for us to get through because as board members, we've got a number of different options. So I'll just make a motion to get conversation going. I move to approve the proposal from Eights Fitness in the amount of $22,801.45 to replace 3 treadmills and a stationary bicycle in the fitness center. Can I get a second?
Second.
No, we've got 3 different motions on it.
12, 26, 29.
We have 3 motions and not all 3 are going to be approved. So I'm starting with the most expensive and then we can go from there so we get more information. So the purpose is to get conversation going. We can't address them until we've got a motion on the table. So the motion on the table is to approve the $22,801. Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. So can I get a second to that? Okay, so Mike, would you give us some background on this motion?
Absolutely. So we had some trouble with some of our tenants. like Bart said, is here. We wanted to provide the board a cost analysis of what we're looking at for replacement of the equipment that we have that's not right now on repair, and needs repair. So we've gotten bids from Ace Fitness to repair, and we've also gotten bids from commercial fitness to replace. Be able to evaluate that. We have a conversation with Ace Fitness, which is the supplier that estimates to our gym equipment. And just recently today, I had an additional conversation to try to get, insight of how long this equipment lasts. I did provide a list of how old some of this equipment is. We have 2 treadmills that are 10 years of age. We have 2 treadmills that are 7 years of age. And 1 bike that's under repair, that is also 10 years of age. Sounds like from recommendation from Ace Fitness is that usually you can get 12 to 15 years out of this equipment before it's needed replaced. The items under the repair estimate are typical repair items, especially for treadmill. From what I understand, I'm the treadmill specialist, but the decks, the belts, and the motors are the normal replacement parts. We service a lot of locations, but we're looking at a pretty significant cost of replacement versus repair. So that's kind of where we're at. Deciding if we want to just go ahead and repair what we have, continue on, or replace a couple, or a couple.
So what we have here is we have a proposal for repairing the stationary bike for over $1,200. And we have a second quote from Ace to repair the 3 treadmills at a little over, $5,000. Or we have a motion from Monarch, Commercial Fitness, to replace the stationary bike and replace the treadmills to a tune of $22,800.
To replace 3 treadmills, 1 bike.
Correct, 3 treadmill, 1 bike.
Is this coming out of this year's budget?
We are currently in this year. So it would come out of this year's, yes, unless we decide to do a different configuration.
Thank you.
Currently in the reserves, we've got a fair amount of money in the bank. But of all of the dollars that were allocated to be spent this year out of reserves, they have been spent in an addition. So by doing the replacement now, the $22,800, that would have to dip further into our reserves, which is currently not budgeted for this year. Am I correct in that statement, Becca? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the determination is that I understand that we're getting a lot of residents who are using that equipment and recognize that it's broken. And the need is to repair, but the question is, do we just repair with the understanding that it's more beneficial to replace? And if we do that, should we do it all or some subset? Am I correct?
Right. And I broke it down a little bit more if you'd like to hear regarding each individual item. You're looking at 2 treadmills, replacing a full treadmill without, labor costs and shipping. You're looking at about $11,550 for 2 treadmills. Repair of those 2 treadmills, $3,200. Roughly the same thing with the other 2 treadmills, because they have issues going on with them right now. Replacing the same $11,550. Repair of $3,000. The bike's a little bit different. We're looking at repair being $1,136 roughly, and then replacing it as such bike $2,750.
Ron, you had a comment on the bicycles from an observation that you made?
I spent a considerable amount of time in the fitness center yesterday on this issue, talking to people and riding the bikes and observing the treadmill operation. I did not get on them, but my observation and this list that we've been handed as far as the age of the equipment that's in there, it absolutely, my recommendation is in line with these oldest items on here. 2 of the treadmills two of the 4 treadmills are not really used at all because they're out of service most of the time, and they're at 11 years old. And I would think that those 2 need to be replaced. And then the third one, which is repairable and is much younger, 7 years old, should be repaired. 3 and 4 should be repaired. They're both 7 years old. Replace the 2 that are 11 years old. On the recumbent bikes, I started out yesterday on this one that's 12 years old. It's a Star Track recumbent bike, and everybody was in there said nobody rides that bike because nobody could figure out how to get it to work. And I had the same experience, and I went to the one that is significantly younger than that, the 800. It's a year younger, and it worked like a champ. And I think that we could get away with just replacing one of those bikes, that Star Track, and replace it with a True. And that's what Commercial Fitness is recommending. So a long story made short, I think that if we replaced treadmills 1 and 2 at the tune of $11,550 and replaced one bike for $2,750, and then shipping and handling, whatever that costs, we're looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $16,000 to put all of the equipment up into shape and get 2 new treadmills and 1 new bike. And I know that there are people that told me yesterday they go over there every day and ride those bicycles, and we should allow them to ride as long as they want to on there. It's a great cardio device, and I know that my oncologist has recommended that when I'm doing chemo, I should go to the bikes and sit down rather than sitting down in my chair and letting my body atrophy. So I think that we need to look at replacing the older equipment and repairing the younger equipment and do what's prudent for that facility.
So your recommendation is that for $15,000, we'd get 2 new treadmills and repair 2 of the
Well,
bicycle.
the repair would be, I couldn't really break it out too well, but it looked to me like the repair of those would be somewhere around $1,500 to repair. To repair number 3 and number 4 treadmill would be somewhere around $1,500. So that would take the amount to about 17,000. But it would still be short of the 22,000 to replace everything that Commercial Fitness wanted to replace, because we'd replace 2 of the treadmills instead of 3 in 1 bike.
Barb, that
Marilyn?
sounds like a good option. I'd like to see the motion
Okay,
change
all right.
to work with that.
I will amend the motion, and I will ask that you create the new one.
I make motion that we purchase 2 True treadmills from Commercial Fitness and 1 True recumbent bike to replace the 2 oldest treadmills and the oldest recumbent bike, not to exceed $18,000.
I'll second that. So now what questions do we have?
Well, I have a concern. I think it's a lot of money to be spent towards, I mean, especially after hearing earlier today on Wendy's announcement about that 20% of people use the fitness center, and we have EOS right down the street. And many of the people here have silver sneakers available that you can use it for free. And when you have people there that will even help you learn how to use the equipment and assist you. Right now, with our reserves as low as they are, to spend more money, to spend almost $20,000 of our reserves on less than 20% of the people who don't even hardly use the fitness center. Personally, I think that that's an extraordinary amount of money.
She said 38% felt that it was important.
20% small is what you see.
So Maria, I have to agree with you a little bit on that too, but she also stated that it's important that we at least repair our equipment that we have to keep it from being run down. So the thought would be, I mean, that's one of the thoughts, right? Is that maybe we repair the equipment we have right now, but we get into the budget, the cost of replacement for next year's budget. And then that way we're not pulling out of the reserve.
I would agree with what Roberta just said, that in light of our long-term planning, that we really need to look at it overall, is that something significant to Happy Trails in general, that would replace that equipment. And I would hate to spend $20,000 or even 17 at this point without going through that process first.
Any other questions, comments from the board member before I open it up to the residents? Okay. So residents, come up to the front and then we'll get you a microphone. Okay. We have Marquetta's in the back. Ladies first here, Brian, okay? You can stay right there, Brian.
My
Brian
question,
Souders, lot 38. It would be greatly appreciated if you get the maintenance done on that equipment before the crowds come here in January. January, February, and March. As a user of the fitness center, it's quite crowded in there and a lot of people will be using it then. So if you could get that repair taking place before January, that'd be wonderful.
Thank you, Brian.
Marquetta McLean, lot 1390. I think you just answered it. I guess my question was, is there a need for 4 treadmills at a time? If so, then I get it, but that's a lot of treadmills. And are there just 2 bikes?
How many bicycles?
According to the list, there's 4 recumbent bikes.
4 bikes and 4 treadmills.
Correct.
Well,
And then
if
4
they-
ellipticals.
If the people that go feel that they need all of those at the same time, then I understand.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Couple more, and then I'll call for the vote and see what the next steps are.
Mike Perry, lot 1790. I'm also a user of that equipment. And as you know, technology improves over time. If any of y'all have ever run on those treadmills, they're like running on concrete. Okay, they're old hard surface treadmills and they just pound your legs. The newer treadmills have a softer deck surface on them and do not affect you as much. So the replacement of that equipment and bringing it up to speed to where the modernization of all of that equipment is greatly needed. More people would use them if it didn't beat you to death when you're running on them or walking on them. So that's my opinion.
So can I ask a question, Mike Perry, and then I'll open it back up to the, regarding this and then your role on BGNM, was there any conversation during this current budget year about replacement and repair of that equipment?
Well, 2 years ago, the BGNM committee went through a very large number of items, probably about a third of the reserve items. And we made recommendations on whether to retain that equipment or replace it or to let it run to failure. That study was not done last year. So any equipment that would have come up in the end of its useful lifespan, we did not review that equipment because we didn't do that study last year.
Okay, because there probably wasn't.
Because we really need to bring that back up again and do it again.
Okay, all right. Michael. I'm sorry, but Lauren, you had your hand up first.
Yeah,
Was
Terry
it?
Bader, lot 953. A question on, at what dollar figure do you folks put things out on bid? In other words, competitive bids to get things replaced such as that?
Anything over $10,000 is we, for a large construction project, we request at least 3 bids. Sometimes it's difficult to get them because people just don't want to bid on it. So we have one for ACE and one for commercial here. So we were able to get 2 different bids.
Oh, so you have 2 different bids on those?
Right.
Okay. Has anybody looked into, because I know most of your commercial gyms these days, has anybody looked into leasing the equipment?
Not to my knowledge.
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
Okay, because that could be a feasible possibility and never have a problem with it breaking down. And like you said, you know, a lot of these treadmills are getting high tech these days. So it might be something that's a possibility to look into. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Lauren?
Lauren Hanson, lot 556. First off, this is an asset to this community. I would hate to see us starting to allow assets of the community starting to deteriorate because we're kind of nitpicking with it. The other part of that, if an air conditioner were to blow out in here, not on scheduled for replacement, we would replace it. The same thing should be with the asset of the fitness center.
Thank you. Donna?
Donna Wisdom, 379. I agree with him. I also, being one of the younger old people, as we will refer to today, I think that I hate spending money, okay? But because of all the homes that are going up for sale and all the newer seniors that are going to be coming in, we really need that fitness center up to par. And if it's like running on concrete, like they're saying, I won't use it because that will kill my knees. But if we put newer things in and take care of them and maintenance them, then we should be.
Not walking anywhere. Yeah, these things are assholes. So I.
Spending $22,000, but you know what? If it's going to bring people in and people are using it and they're happy with the newer stuff, there's going to be more people using it. And I think that it should be looked at that way.
Okay. Thank you. A couple more questions and then we'll call for the vote. Charlie?
Thanks, Barb. Charlie Fudge, lot 697. I really don't have a dog in this fight because I don't use that very often. But you discount it because only 20% use. Well, at peak capacity, we're 3,500 people here. 20% of 3,500 people is 700 people. You want to disenfranchise 700 people? I think you ought to do the job and replace and repair.
Okay. Okay, one more.
Lynn Edwards, 1434. I just want to repeat or agree with all these people. I'm second year here, and the first thing I asked was there a fitness center? And I've looked at that equipment, and it scares me. So I think that they should be fixed so that people who want to take care of themselves can do so.
Barb, I have a question. What if we
Oh.
were to table this and then go out and get prices on leasing equipment so we have a better informed decision that we can make?
All right.
I mean, I hate to put off the equipment, but if we could get some leasing options, which we should be able to get within a week or less, then we could call for a special meeting to go with it.
I'm not against that as an option. The question I have though for today, which of these pieces of equipment are a safety concern?
As of right now, there's none.
Okay.
One is down, completely down, not functioning.
But there's still options for
Yes.
people to do that. Okay, all right. Withdraw?
My final comment would be that when we bring people through on the stagecoach that are interested in looking at property here, that when they walk into a facility like the fitness room, my first two comments were, it's way too small for the number of people that are in there using it. The equipment is pretty closely crammed together in there, particularly the ellipticals are very closely crammed together. And the treadmills are as well. We could use a little bit more space in there. But if you walk into a fitness center and equipment is unplugged because it's inoperable, that's a huge negative. And it was like the argument that I went in favor of this summer on the special meeting to finish the courts down at Cascades for the pickleball club. If we look like we're too poor to complete a project that we started, I think that's a huge negative. And I supported that idea of refinishing those other courts down there because of the tournament coming up in January. The resurfacing and repair to the bathrooms in the Cascades, if you haven't seen it, it's a huge plus. I walked into the men's bathroom. I haven't been in the women's bathroom yet down there, but I will sometime by mistake. I have a propensity to do that. And it's not intentional. But anyway, when I walked into the men's bathroom, my comment was, wow, this cannot be the same bathroom that I walked into 6 months ago that looked like it was back in the 1970s or something. And so anyway, my point is that the aesthetic value to a prospective buyer is huge. When they see inoperable equipment or unfinished tennis courts or pickleball courts or pool decks that are falling apart like NC2's pool is, we have to repair those things. And we have to make this place look a lot better if we want. I mean, you heard the report from Dr. Holtzman this morning. I was encouraged by it because it matches with what our observation is of what's going on in Happy Trails. And when we emphasize putting money into the reserves, it's so the money is there to do these kinds of things, to replace treadmills that are 11 or 12 years old, or bikes that are 11 or 12 years old that no longer operate, so that people don't get discouraged. Yes, they might have something in their insurance that allows them to go and get free membership at these clubs, but you also saw that people want shuttle service to go to appointments. So there's some people who can't get out and do it, or don't prefer to go out and mix and sit when somebody else is sitting and holding equipment. I like to be able to go in there and grab a bike and ride for a little bit, but they're busy. I've been in there. It gets more use than the billiards room does, and it's got a lot more space. So, you know, I'm looking at it from the aesthetic value of a prospective owner and for the owners that are here now. And I've heard what they've said when they're in there using that equipment.
So Ron, to clarify, your motion then to about $18,000 is to replace 2 of the treadmills and repair 2 of the bicycles. Am I correct?
Replace 2 treadmills is to replace 2 treadmills and 1 recumbent bike, and to repair a 3rd treadmill, number 3 treadmill, what they called mid right.
Good. And then as how I interpreted Wendy Hulsman's report, and I said, I wrote down that she said there was 38% of the respondents use it. What I was looking at in the report was knowing that community should be referred to as Venture Out, and then another community in East Side, East Mesa called Sunland Village. Both of those groups expanded their exercise facilities significantly to look almost like an EOS or another freestanding fitness center. So what I heard her say, what I'm interpreting, what she said is that we don't need to become an EOS, but we still have a number of people who use this facility, and we need to make it as user-friendly as we can and with a reasonable amount of equipment in there. So Mike. Nice.
If I may add that the $18,000 to replace 2 treadmills, 1 bike, and repair the existing would not cover the repairs to the existing. We're looking at $19,434 for 2 treadmills, 1 bike replacement, and repair of the existing bike and treadmill.
Barbara?
Okay, yes, Steve. Steve, get us out of this hole.
We've already, much earlier in the year, probably less than a month out from the time the budget was adopted for the reserve, found it within ourselves to come up with several thousands, almost 16,000 as I recall, to fix pickleball courts. And if
Yep.
we can fix pickleball courts for 16,000 bucks, we sure as hell ought to be able to do this for the amount necessary.
So why don't we just go?
I don't know where you're getting the figure from, Mike, because I looked at the repairs to to that mid-ride bike, and it has a walk belt of 642, a deck of 363 or 349, and a drive belt for $43. And that to me came to 1035. That new console would be for one of those bikes that would, the treadmill would be replaced.
Incorrect. The new console is for number 8, which is only a 7-year-old treadmill. It's one of the newer treadmills.
Okay.
So we're looking at $4,000 for the repairs to the existing on top of the replacement of the 2 treadmills and 1 bike. Because the 1 bike broken currently is not the bike that's the oldest.
So Mike, nice. If we went with the original motion to accept the $22,800 to replace it all from commercial, what's the turnaround time? If we place the order, when would we get it? If I recall, in the past, we had a really long lead time in getting the current recumbent, the most recent recumbent bike we bought.
I think it varies. I would have to clarify that information for you, how quickly we can put in for this purchase. But it's going to vary where they're coming from and how quickly we can get them. But it's unknown as of right this moment.
But we could get them repaired quicker.
We could get them repaired immediately, yes.
So which one needs a console?
Treadmill number 8.
I think there's too much unknown here and too many options. I
There
think
are.
we need to table this and really take a more serious look at it with the understanding that the equipment needs to be repaired or replaced. We need decent equipment in there, not just let it sit dead.
And that would give us time to also look at leasing
And look at the
options.
lease. All right. Are you willing to?
Is treadmill number 8 the one on the left? Is that the one that's unplugged?
That is correct.
But that one's only 7 years old?
That is correct. The 2 on the far right-hand side are the oldest treadmills. They're older
And they
style.
work the best.
I haven't ran on them, but they may. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
They do. They work the best.
So would you be willing to rescind your motion so that we could table this and bring it back to our January board meeting?
Yep.
All right. Let's do that then. All in favor of that, say aye. Aye. Okay, and we'll also look into the leasing options at that time. Let's move on then, because we do need to get an executive session because we do have a lawyer coming to speak to us. The next thing on the agenda is the insurance renewal. So I'll make a motion to approve the HTCA renewal of the insurance policy. Can I get a second? So we have a second on that. This is the time of year that our insurance policy comes up for renewal. We don't have the umbrella information yet on it, but as I compare it to the previous quote that we had, a year ago, notwithstanding the umbrella liability, which is still to be determined, there are some aspects of the quote that are higher, some that are lower, but of interest, the quote regarding coverage of our property, which is the amount that we've got in there's 8 million. So that's like the items in our reserve. It's an increase of about 16% from last year's quote. And as they said in our bid, it is an increase in property limit is due to inflation. There are other items that are slightly up and others that are down. So Darlene, has the broker gotten back to you yet about the umbrella coverage?
No, they're waiting for the loss report, and we should get that anytime now. Once they get the loss report for the year, then they can do the umbrella.
Okay. So any questions or comments from the board members about the liability coverage to approve the amendment? To approve the renewal, excuse me?
I think if the CCNRs require us to have full coverage on our buildings, we have to agree with it.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And all of the items that are in there are items that we have to have covered, all of the bullet points. Any other comments on that side? Any comments from any of the residents regarding the liability policy renewal? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Great, no opposed, it passes. Next thing on the agenda is a policy. And this, so I make a move to approve the caregiver variance criteria. Can I get a second?
Second.
In our board packet, we have a definition of a caregiver. As you know, we frequently get requests from residents to allow a caregiver in place. And we have always stated that that caregiver needs to be someone who is providing a substantial care to the person. We also know that there are some, none of you here, some people who have been told by others that when they want a third person on the lot, all they have to do is just say that they're a caregiver. And we felt the need to really have some criteria in place. So I'll read that. So therefore, the board may provide a variance for a caregiver if the following conditions are met and limitations are agreed upon. A caregiver, regardless of the age of the caregiver, is defined as a person hired or compensated to provide live-in, long-term, or terminal health care to a resident or family member of the resident. The care provided by the caregiver must be substantial in nature and also must provide either medical treatment or assistance with activities of daily living or both. That means toileting, dressing, medications, eating. The rights of a caregiver to occupy the unit extends to a period of time when the caregiver is providing care to the residents for compensation. Compensation does not solely include monetary payment, but also includes provisions for lodging and food in exchange for care. Only one live-in caregiver may be designated per lot. The caregiver must adhere to the rules and regulations of the resort. The caregiver may have access to the common area amenities in support of the resident requiring care. And caregivers would not be allowed to join clubs. And any approved caregiver variance must be reviewed for continual approval support every 12 months. We go on to say that in the event of the death of the resident, the caregiver may stay on for a certain period of time. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Does the request that we've been given today meet all of these criteria?
Those we'll be talking about those in executive sessions. Some do and some don't.
Thank you.
So the definition, as we've outlined here, are definitions that are included in states that have definitions. Arizona does not have a defined caregiver definition, but we felt the need for the board to have some criteria so that from case to case, it's being used consistently.
Barb, doesn't this policy also discuss the fact that if the resident leaves, let's say, for a specified time, like a vacation or goes back to their home state, that the caregiver also has to leave the property?
Well, in that case, yes, the caregiver would be able to stay on if that person's been hospitalized.
Yeah, I agree. That would.
Yeah, if they've been hospitalized and then we'll have a process in place for that. But yeah. Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Any questions, comment? I'm sorry, Steve.
I think you spoke in that proposed policy for a caregiver.
Only one
Uh,
live-in per designated lot, yes.
Just thinking about my own parents when they were going through that, 24/7, you're not going to last very long. A caregiver. There will be need and times that there may need to be two. So we need to be, if the policy says that, it ought to have some ability to have some judgment and common sense relative to the
Yeah.
care.
I agree, and I believe that there would be. It says only one may be designated per lot, doesn't mean shall be designated per lot.
Yeah, that would be, I agree with you, Steve. So someone that's terminally ill and they're not in hospice and you have a son and a daughter that are constantly taking care of them, that would be something that we could approve as like a variance to the policy for that individual.
As a separate thing, what this also implies is that if I'm the caregiver for my mother, she's been dead a long time, so, but if I hire a caregiver for our house and the caregiver has a child, that child is not able to come along and live with mom. Okay. Yeah, okay. Any questions from the board? Excuse me, from the residents. I'm looking right at you residents and I say, Mike and Donna.
I only have one reservation about that, the age. Because I could say my 16-year-old granddaughter is taking care of me as my caregiver. And I think a lot of people would be like, no, that's too young. But they have to have some kind of knowledge on how to be a caregiver, go through a class,
Yes.
something that they prove that they are a actual caregiver.
Right.
So that's the only reservation I have is about the age.
Well, the age would have to be over 18, but in the age of this person, if they're over 18 and under 40, they would not count in our 55 and older count of that. So yes, they would have to have all that. So we couldn't be a 16-year-old, have to be at least 18.
Okay.
Okay. Mike?
How many caregivers do we have now in the resort?
I do not know. We
So,
probably have about, I wouldn't be surprised if it's 10 or more.
so if we don't know how many are here, how are we going to monitor a caregiver?
Because there will be a process in place for them having to come in, and they will meet with them in executive session. And so we'll know who they are. They'll actually have to be,
Yeah, but who goes out and monitors whether or not the caregiver is needed or not? Because I know caregivers in here that are living here that don't need to give care anymore.
right. So that's one of the reasons that we have in here that it has to be reviewed every 24 months. So that we'll know whether it's 12 months, sorry, whether it continues on or not.
So you're going to keep a list and
We'll keep a
monitor
list.
it.
The difficulty that you have about when someone says they need a caregiver and they bring a doctor's note, we have to, from determine whether we do a reasonable accommodation or not. If the disability is evident, we're not able to ask what that is. But in here, when we say you have to be able to say that this person needs this thing, and it could be under perjury, under penalty that you lied, I think that's one thing. When we get a doctor's note, though, I personally am suspect. Now, I say that having had RN after my name for 40 years. It's no longer there, but I used to. And I know from the last 12 years of my career in primary care that any one of you might call up for your doctor and you say, I need a letter from my doctor so that I can get a caregiver so that I can live at Happy Trails. And the nurse on the other end of that line says, now what do you want it to say? Okay, let me write that down. During the doctor's lunch break, I'll have him sign that. And he put it in front of his face or her face and he signs it. So I don't put a lot of credence in that personally. But I do have to take it into consideration. As a board, we have the ability to try to clarify what specifically that person needs and to determine whether we feel that it's appropriate or not. But we can't say no without doing that due diligence. So it's a conundrum, Mike, but by this criteria, we're hoping that we can weed some of that out. So we have something to base our determination on. Any other questions, comments from the board? Residents? Let's take the vote. The motion on the table is to approve the caregiver variance criteria. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Next motion on the table is this would be an amendment to a current policy or a revision to a current policy. I move to approve that the Happy Trails Association general manager expenditures be increased to $7,500. Can I get a second?
Second.
The current expenditures approved by prior boards was $3,500 that was done in 2005. I believe a colleague of mine sitting there, I and even Steve, we probably approved it up to $5,000 and I couldn't find that. Because of costs that have gone up and bids that need to come in from an emergency perspective, the board would like to increase that authorization to the general manager to approve an expense up to $7,500. Any questions from any board members? Seeing none, any questions from any residents? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the revision to the policy regarding manager expenditures to increase it to $7,500. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Last thing on the agenda here is the reserve study proposal. Steve or Becca, do you want to make a motion?
I can do it. I move to approve the reserve study proposal from Associated Reserves for a 3-year contract.
Second.
Great. So Steve or Becca, do you want to give us a little background on this?
Well, this is a study that we do either on-site or off-site, and to us, it's on-site, bill once every 3 years. Second tour, and this is the company we currently have. We have been relatively successful in getting them to address our concerns, provide the kind of data that we need. They've made recommendations relative to what ought to be and what ought not to be continued to be on the reserve list. To change companies would cost a significant amount of money. I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars. That makes no sense. We have been pretty satisfied with folks at Associated Reserve, and they've been very responsive to our request for information and changes in format, those sorts of things. I would strongly recommend that we continue our relationship with them.
So then you're requesting the option C, the loyalty update, which would be a 3-year agreement of $5,530 per year for 3 years? Yep. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other questions, comments from the board? I agree with you, Steve and Becca, that, and I know that Mike Rugland has had a lot of experience with this company. There's benefits and disadvantages to having a reserve study. A lot of times they don't tell us the amount that needed to replace an item is significantly less than it actually plays out to be. But that has a lot to do with actuarials. But I know in this last year, between Mike Perry and yourself and finance, the budget committee, you've really gotten a good rapport with this company to meet our needs. So
For those of us who are new and have not been involved in reserve studies, when they do the on-site, do people go with them or
our staff does go with them, and then they send a number of people. They usually have 2 or 3 people with them on site as they go around and look all of the equipment on all the items. And if you notice in your board packet, as you scan down through it, I'm just trying to get to a page. I apologize that I'm Can't find the page I'm looking at. So you'll notice on
Yes.
this page here,
Right.
and so it's the item number 110, the entry system replaced. It says that it was replaced in 2014 for 3,800. It was previously installed in 2002. There are no signs of physical damage, but some minor surface wear was noted, still functional in good condition. So that's how they update it. So they give us pictures of all of these items and their impression on what it should be. And that's how the whole database is updated.
I just wondered how many people and other than our wonderful people like our operations
It's at least
managers
2 or
that work with
3,
them.
isn't it, Mike Rugland? It's at least 2 or 3 gentlemen, youngsters that they bring with them. Not a gray hair in the bunch. Yeah, great. Any questions, comments from the residents? Michael?
Roofs and so on. I don't want to put any more work on Mike Perry, but has anybody looked at what's going to happen with the advent of increased oil and all that for road work and stuff like that? I know Mike's pretty on top of what it's going to cost us, but I'm sure the reserve fund is not adequate to cover it this year. Are we going to talk to them about what they need for next 3 years?
Well, in this last summer, we hired a consultant, a gentleman by the name of Michael Franks. He owns a civil engineering company, and their specialty is asphalting and seal coating and crack repairs and strictly and other civil engineers, hydraulic properties and whatnot. And we had a great project this summer. They managed it for us, did a good job for us, and they're in the process of doing the next summer's bidding for Section 4 and the villas. And then the following year, we'll finish up the ones that we haven't done, which will be Section 8, Town Center parking lot. And we should finish all of the roads and asphalting. So as far as the projection of cost, we're pretty subject to whatever the market is at the time. I know the price of oil is not $100 a barrel, but the price of asphalt hasn't come down. It stayed the same as it was, and I don't foresee that it'll come down much. We're kind of at the mercy of the people who manufacture that asphalt concrete. So once they've got their pricing up, I doubt they're going to reduce it much. So, Mike, I can't totally answer that completely. Prepared a budget, an estimated budget for this summer's project, presented it to the budget committee yesterday or the day before, and will by the end of this term have the one for the following year projected so we can put that in the budget. So and all I've done is just take what we had and added another 10 or 12% to what it cost us this year, next year, and the year after that. So, and that's been historically what's happened. We've had a 10 to 15% increase in the cost of not only the material used, but the labor and the equipment costs it takes to put it down. It's a very labor and machine intensive process. So, yes. Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks, sir.
I don't want to ask you a question. I want to talk about it. To answer your question, will the reserve roads and roads will likely not will exceed what it is. So we're going to see another dip in the number probably this year. Although a repayment plan is being discussed in budget now to how are we going to bring this back up to a number, closer to that 5 or 6 million that we had. So such. In addressing the motion that's there right now, last February, budget undertook a internet study of several other companies, and we looked, and yes, their format reports might have been slightly different. Essentially, they gave us the same information. So changing horses was not a really good idea. We didn't see any real benefit in changing horses. The thing we did do is we had a phone call with Reserve and said, we've got a number of problems here. It's hard to access your database. And they said, oh, well, that's because your report comes out in March and we closed access to the databases in February. So we never had access. He says, but he said, if you'd like access, I'll give it to you. So within the day, I got the report that we had been complaining we weren't getting. So it was a matter of asking the right question to the right person, and they're very willing to work with us. So we were able to get that. As far as reserves covering the right amount, that is a problem of being what data we report to them and whether we keep it updated. If we just let Associated Reserves update the report, they're going to use some national average, and it's not going to be very aggressive. We finished, let's say we've just about finished roads. So the next time we're going to need to do road work in a major way is going to be 30 years from now. So does anybody have an idea what the cost should be? You know, will they even allow asphalt 30 years from now? You know, we don't know. So, but if we stay with it every couple of years and say, hey, we see this happening, we can add to the reserve or build that number up as it goes along. So it's a matter of being more aggressive in our participation, not just letting reserve throw a number at us and say, thank you very much, we'll file the report. If we look at it line by line and take a quick look and say, you know, are you right on this? Or we've seen experience, our fitness equipment is much higher than you think it's going to be. They will make that change. We just have to stay aggressive on it and not fall asleep. So I think staying with reserve is good and very workable for us.
Thank you. Any other questions from the residents?
Barb, can I ask a question, even though I'm not a resident?
Yes. You may.
For the reserves, did we increase the limit that we, you know, like some on the reserve study, $2,500 would have been in the reserve to spend. Have we increased that either internally or with them to be more applicable to our size?
I can answer that. The number used to be $1,000 on it. This last report arbitrarily was $2,000. And it's a question we're going to ask in February. Where did that get cut off? It cut off a batch of lower items, but you know, we can cover those very easily. We've talked about going up to numbers as high as not reserving against any number as much as maybe $5,000 and just expensing as they come along. If you read the current reserve study, they recommended oftentimes as much as 1% of your budget, which is $35,000. And so there's a number there. Likely we're going to raise the limit and not talk about items under $2,000 or $3,000, and in coming years ratchet that up even higher.
Any other questions from the residents? I think we might need a motion at another time that all of us former board members only get like 10 questions a quarter or something.
All right, I'll shut up. The question always has been in the past, if we raise the limit, what goes in the reserve fund, $5,000? How do we manage and how do we keep track of that? In other words, how do we keep track of when it needs to be done? How do we keep track of what it is and what the costs are associated with it? So that's always a problem.
Yeah, we do have an awful lot out there in deferred maintenance too that we need to be very attentive to. Seeing no more questions, I'll call for the vote. The motion is to approve a reserve study proposal from Associated Reserves for a 3-year contract, and that's $5,530 each year. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. The rest of the items regarding on our agenda are regarding variances, and all of them speak to the health of an individual member. So with that, we're going to turn those over into our executive session, something that does not need to be in an open session for resident privacy. So with that, I'll move on to the president's announcements. I have a few things here that I wanted to bring up. First off, I really grateful for the residents' participation in the long-range planning process. I thought that the information that we received for Wendy Holzman this morning preliminary was really very exciting. A lot of information for us to absorb, and we really look forward to the focus groups in January. So we'll be getting more information out on that and really encouraging all of you to participate because it is your community that we all will be making that long-range plan for them. The second thing I wanted to mention had to do with the proposed amendment that the board had been working on, potential amendment to the CCNRs regarding the putting some restrictions on rental properties. We have an ad hoc committee for that. And what I'm going to do at this time is dissolve that committee. We feel we've got the information that we need at this time, but more needs to be done. I will take responsibility in that I did create the ad hoc committee, which I have the authority to do. In hindsight, it should have been a focus group. And so what we'll do is we're going to be busy in January with the long-range planning focus groups. So we will not be doing anything more in discussing the potential rental restriction proposed amendment, but we'll be looking at having a focus group possibly in February. So more to come on that. The board is currently reviewing possible changes to the rules and regulations. It's been a while since we've done that. There was the DRC committee looked at that. And also there's also some changes that need to be implemented as a result of changes to the Arizona state statutes. So we're going to be looking at those in more detail more this month. And our plan is to bring the draft ready for formal presentation to the community for your input in early January. And with the hope that the board can probably approve those at the board meeting in January, if not February. I also want to remind people that there are 3 people on your board whose term is up in February. And so we're looking forward to applications for the board at 3 vacancies that are available on the board. 2 of those terms will be for 3 years. 1 of the terms will be for 1 year. Serving on the board is your opportunity to serve your community. And if you're thinking that now might be the right time to do that or isn't, if it isn't the right time, to encourage you to get on a committee. The deadline to apply for the board, so this might be your Christmas present to the community, is January 3rd at 3 p.m. So serving on the board really is great for me. We complain a lot, but we also acknowledge that it does help us to really listen to you and know what's to be said. We also, as I jokingly say to people, we have to acknowledge that we are not God, because if we were, you wouldn't be able to take our name in vain, right? So the last thing I want to say is that let's have a happy, safe holiday. Acknowledge that there is conversation out there that there are more and more of our residents who have got the flu, who've got colds, and who are also testing positive for COVID. So just encouraging you, for those of you who are feeling the need to wear a mask or social distance, that all of us are respectful of that. So also talk about the safety mention that at the meeting today. Dr. Holzman mentioned that there's concerns of residents about safety. Last year about this time was the only time that we really had any thefts reported to the city of Surprise. And it was a lot of residents not locking up their things. And there's a lot of people looking for your toys around this holiday time. So please remember to lock your things up. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to management for a manager's report.
We don't really have a lot except to say that the Roy Rogers Gate is open and working finally. Also, the management would just like to wish all of you a happy holidays. Again, as like Barbara said, stay safe, stay well, and take care. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll call for adjournment. All in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, we got lots of time for the executives. I was wondering if we were going to take like 3.